seeing how it's impacting teenagers and young adults is just absolutely remarkable in a bad way, right?
Yeah.
It increases or decreases in empathy, increase in self-harm and suicide rates. It's pretty wild.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. V, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. Now, most days it feels impossible to disconnect. I know so because I'm in the media space, I've got digital devices. Let me ask you the following. Does your anxiety rise when you can't feel that familiar rectangle in your front or back pocket? Do you find yourself taking the phone with you to the bathroom? Maybe even into the shower? Do you prioritize cell phone use over relationships? Have you pretended to check your phone to avoid talking to people? You can't go more than an hour without looking down on your screen. Or if you're a parent, are you concerned with tech use and devices with your children at any level? If so, you're going to want to listen in on this podcast because we talk about the mental, emotional, physical, social, and spiritual consequences of unconscious tech use. All this on today's podcast. If this is the first time you're joining, welcome in. The Thrive State Podcast is really the space to bring in heart-centered leaders, to talk about the tools, the tactics, the techniques on how to live our best life. How do we connect better in our relationships? How do we have optimal health? How do we achieve longevity? How do we get into the Thrive state? For those of you that are returning and listening in on this podcast, welcome back. Thank you for being a loyal listener. If you haven't already, please support the show by leaving a 5-star review wherever podcasts are heard. That's going to help the show grow. And also, if you didn't know, the second edition of my book, Thrive State, has been released and has been a #1 bestseller on Amazon. And if you really want to know additional tactics on how to get into the Thrive State, what are the things that are going to stop you from getting into the Thrive State, and how you being in the Thrive State not only affects every single cell in your body, but actually how it affects your families, your organizations, and your businesses. This second edition is packed with additional expanded content to take you and the people you love to the next level. So pick up a second edition of Thrive State at thrivestatebook.com. Now, on today's podcast, we talk about technology and the role it has in our health. Now, if we look at technology, it could be a really good thing. For example, in the longevity space, we have technology able to diagnose cancers at a very early level. We have stem cells and exosomes that help regenerate tissue and help it to heal. We have all this technology in the space which I call the science of longevity. But if we look at where people live the longest, people in the blue zones, they actually don't have access to any of this technology. In fact, how they live their life as human beings are actually medicine that actually promotes health and promotes a long life. The people in the blue zones didn't have technology that allows them to do their gardening for them. They do it themselves. They don't have the cars that actually take them from place to place. They're on their bikes or they walk. In this episode, we talk about how it's actually not the duration of the technology that is really the issue, but the use and the conscious use of technology. And also, we'll be discussing the strategies of how to wean yourself from the technology if you find that technology is taking away from your physical, your mental, your emotional health. With us on today's podcast is Forrest Bronzan. He is the co-founder and CEO of Digital Detox. He's an entrepreneur, investor, speaker, and active advisor to private equity firms and fast growth to global enterprise brand and CEOs. Prior to joining Digital Detox, he was the founder and CEO of Email Amplitude. Email Amplitude was actually the fastest growing global loyalty CRM agency, growing to 8-figure ARR with no outside funding, no debt, and no outbound sales team. He is really now taking the charge of digital detox because it has seen the effects that we have in terms of our mental health, in terms of our loss of connection with other people. And as we know, our physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual health, all those things actually create the thrive state. And the unconscious use of technology can actually decrease basically all these factors in our life, leading to more loneliness, more suicide rates, more depression rates, more physical health, and more chronic disease. So this is a very important conversation. Please enjoy this episode of the Thrive State podcast with Forrest Bronzan. Forrest Bronzan, welcome to the Thrive State podcast, my friend.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
You know, when your team reached out to me about this conversation, I was really excited because I was really thinking about how technology has shifted our lives. And certainly, you know, we can reap all the benefits, but we are beginning to discover that it has significant effects on our mental, physical, emotional health. And I can't wait to get into more of the detail on that in the podcast. But before we begin, there is a segment of the show called the 5 to Thrive, game show style. And of course, as any game show, there is a prize. And so the next time we meet, if you win the 5 to Thrive, you get a healthy meal on me. How does that sound, Forrest?
I'll do my best. Let's do it.
All right, here we go. 1,000 points each. First, starting with this question here is, if you could have any superpower, what would it be and why?
Any superpower? Wow. To be able to go back in time and talk to some loved ones that have passed.
Oh, beautiful. Question number 2. That's 1,000 points. What is one item on your bucket list that you want to cross off in the next 2 years?
In the next 2 years, safari in Africa.
Safari in Africa. All right. Awesome. Question number 3 is, what is the most adventurous or daring thing you've ever done?
Oh, wow. Adventurous or daring thing. At one point, I played in a band in another lifetime, and we had the opportunity to showcase with P. Diddy and some other big enterprise reps. And we didn't do too well, but we took the chance, and that was a lot of fun. Good experience.
Well, super daring. What instrument did you play?
I played guitar, maybe evidenced by the axes in the back. Not very well, but this was right out of high school, so we were young and thought we were better than we were.
Oh wow! Hey, you know what? I think everybody should have that belief, because who knows? I mean, that leads you in the world of possibility. Question number 4 is, if you could spend a day with any celebrity or historical figure, who would it be with, and what would you do together?
Celebrity or historical figure? Interesting. I mean, there's a lot on my list. I'd love to hang out with Obama, Steph Curry. If I had to pick one, I don't know. That's one of the most difficult questions so far. Let's keep it light. Let's say Steph Curry. We'll talk shop on
Steph
sports.
Curry. You could talk about how you guys are going to lose to the Lakers tonight. I'm just kidding. Question number 5 is, what is a favorite guilty pleasure that you wouldn't be embarrassed to admit now?
Guilty pleasure, probably. So I'm very disciplined with diet and exercise, and my guilty pleasure might be Oreo cookies and whole milk.
Ooh, so good. A favorite childhood treat for me. Well, thank you. That is 5,000 points out of 5,000 points, which means you win, which means the next time we see each other in person, there's a healthy meal on me. We could sit together and console the loss of last year's champs, the Golden State Warriors, to the Lakers in Game 5. No, I'm kidding. I am a Laker fan, though, and on the day of this recording, it will be Game 5. Lakers are up 3-1 currently, but that's enough of sports. Let's talk a little bit about digital detox. You know, I am in the media space. My fiance is in the media space and doing a lot of influencer work. We are on our phones a lot, and certainly we have already felt the effects of, one, maybe not connecting as we should when we're out. We've also gotten into probably little bits of depression and due to the comparison you see, yourself with other people and things like that. And we certainly know that to be the space. As the CEO of Digital Detox, when did you find out that, tech and our devices have become a problem? And what was the catalyst for you to want to make it a problem you want to solve?
Yeah, no, lot to unpack there, and I appreciate the question. It's interesting because it's something that impacts every age, every demographic, every corner of the globe. We have customers now in over 80 countries, and I just got back from a European tour, meeting one-on-one with folks around the world, and you can't get away from it.
Yeah.
Everywhere it's impacting us. And to be clear, digital detox, like our argument isn't anti-tech. I have the
Yeah.
latest iPhone. I love it, right? So we're not advocating to move to the woods and throw away your phone at all, but we are advocating to take small steps to have a little bit better relationships, improve balance, improve mental health and fitness. And there's a lot we can do in that regard. So what got me really motivated into it, and I've been in this space for a while, probably a couple different pillars. One, when I had children, and then seeing a lot of my other parent friends constantly on their phones and modeling that bad behavior in front of kids, and about that a little bit later, hopefully. It's sort of a two-pronged issue. One, you're modeling the bad behavior so they learn at a young age, and two, you're not enjoying that one-on-one experience with your
Yeah.
children. So that was probably the first pillar, saying like, I don't want this. And at the time I was had another startup that was scaling really fast, and I was hyper busy and hyper connected. I didn't like how I felt. I didn't like how my relationships were going with my own family, and
Yeah.
wanted to put a cold stop to that. But then also seeing how it's impacting teenagers and young adults is just absolutely remarkable in a bad way, right?
Yeah.
It increases or decreases in empathy, increase in self harm and suicide rates. It's pretty wild, and that's not just with teens. I mean, as we get into adults, as
Yeah.
you alluded to, relationships are suffering. Something like 50% of people report after meeting on a dating app, their companion on their date is on their device, not checking schedule, but scrolling through TikTok, scrolling through Instagram, and not being present. So, just as a society, we're losing connection, we're losing presence, and that comes at a huge opportunity cost and a huge impact to mental and physical health.
No, absolutely. I mean, I was just speaking with a longevity board, and we were just talking about how human connection is really the nutrient that is much needed. That, human beings are designed to have connection, and it actually changes our biology, which is why people who are lonely as they get older seem to have more proclivity for early death and disease, including heart disease.
Sure.
So you've nailed it on the head there. What we also know is, tech and devices seem to draw people away. I was also just asked by a research article on whether incidental exercise is good for us. And incidental exercise is just exercise you don't plan to do. But if we look at where people live the longest all over the world, in the blue zones, they're
Sure.
not really calling it exercise because it's activity they are actually doing every single day. They don't have the conveniences in our kitchens, for washing dishes or for cleaning. They're doing all that themselves. So activity is up. So we know that devices is actually decreased connection, is decreased our activity levels. How has Digital Detox as a company, you know, uh, aimed to solve some of these problems?
Yeah, just to touch on that, on a lot of people don't think about the physical and athletic impacts of technology. We
Yeah.
think mostly on relationships and personal, which is absolutely huge. But I had a meeting last week with a major university, and they're reporting decrease in athletic ability with their golf team, because the athletes are during training sessions distracted by their phone, and so it's we're getting into some more research and data on the specific mechanics and mechanisms of that. But you shouldn't have your phone with you when you're in the gym working out. It throws off a lot of the muscular chemistry and the effectiveness of the workout, and then just the focus and attention on a competitive athletic teams. That's not a good combination. So yeah, where Digital Detox started, we started in the live event space. So huge summer camps for adults and retreats and unplug nights, and that's powerful. Having those kind of brief moments to detox, if you will, and have real connection, add a tremendous amount of value. We've transitioned a little bit more. So while we're still doing events, we've transitioned a lot more into data and helping folks at a much broader scale. So again, like we have customers in over 80 countries. In some ways, we're working one-on-one with them on coaching. We work with a lot of schools and educational facilities on policy and how to deal with a lot of the issues that they're seeing with their teens. And then for adults, we're launching a score. Probably by the time this airs, it'll be live 2 weeks from now, end of May. And it's a very sophisticated score we've been working on with some of the top behavioral psychologists, psychiatrists, and psychometricians in the country. And it's a very quick assessment to give you perspective on how much technology is impacting your life.
Mm.
And that's going to be the segue into a lot of other offerings we have launching this summer that take folks on a journey to have a very personalized experience on what do I need to improve and why. Everyone's different. I might have challenges with one specific area of how technology might be owning me. You might be very different as well. And so we're trying to create these very curated and personalized journeys and experiences to help everyone on an individual basis. But it really comes down to identifying what are some of the big things that are impacting your life, and how do we take small steps to chip away and improve those one by one.
Sounds good. It really seems like you guys are, consulting business, working with both individuals and larger groups through basically one-on-one coaching and events.
Yeah, that's accurate. And then we're turning more into a self-serve model, a
Got it.
licensing model where you could sign up. The score's free, take that for free. And then from there, we'll have a premium subscription where it guides you along, and we have a lot of expert data and database research behind it. But we're turning a little bit more into a premium subscription and content model.
Oh, can't wait to learn more into that. Well, let's dive specifically into some problems then, because I'm pretty sure the people listening want some good take-home strategies on what to do. One, I am a parent, and admittedly so, I have probably used a phone or a device to, coddle or to soothe
Sure.
my toddler. You know, I'm finding that to be a mistake. So one, for the parents who have probably used that now, how do we start to wean those things from our kids and not, necessarily model those things for our children moving forward?
Well, yeah. So two comments. One, the conversation's transitioned a little bit. Several years ago, it was much more about screen time, and that was the number one question. What's the appropriate amount of hours per day? And now it's, I mean, while that's still a concern, like we don't want a 3-year-old on 9 hours of iPad, right?
Right.
It's slightly less about screen time and more what they're doing with the screen. There's some
Yeah.
brilliant uses of the iPad. My third grader is learning anatomy and astronomy in just a breathtaking way using technology, and that's a good use of tech. A bad use of tech would be a second grader on TikTok or just doom scrolling on YouTube, right? So
Right.
it's more what you're doing. In terms of the modeling, we're focused a little bit more, and part of that is those big parenting decisions. How much time and what do I allow them to watch? It gets trickier in middle school years, and it depends on the community, and we could talk about that on do they get a phone, do they get social media, etc. But it's more about the presence, right? So think about it. Like if you're with your 3-year-old or 7-year-old son and you're on your phone, you're not really present with them. And so not
Mm.
only are they learning that behavior of, okay, it's okay for dad to be on his phone at the dinner table or when we're fishing, which is bad behavior or not optimal behavior, but then they're not having that experience. You're missing out on that optimal experience to have with your child or your spouse or your girlfriend or whomever it is. So one thing we recommend just out the gate is think about prioritizing the experience that you're in. There's a time for everything. There's a time to
Mm.
be on your device and to be working hard. Usually that shouldn't be when you're in a interpersonal setting. So if you're at dinner, if you're on a date, if you're playing a game with your son, keep that separate. You shouldn't be doing those both at the same time. But then there's clear delineation. There's time that dad or mom needs to go work, needs to be on their phone, etc. But try not to blend the two. So that's usually a starting point. Second would be, and it's going to depend case by case. And again, like we give our kids iPads on the plane too. We just got back from Europe and it's hard to get through a 10-hour flight with no movies. That's okay. You shouldn't be ashamed to use some really fun and entertaining technology in a positive way, but not as the default and the always go-to mechanism, if that helps.
Mm. This episode of the Thrive State podcast is brought to you by the Thrive State Accelerator. The Thrive State Accelerator is actually a home course that I developed using the exact same techniques I work with my celebrity clients, CEOs, and executives on how to get them to the Thrive State. The Thrive State Accelerator teaches you how to master your 7 bioenergetic elements. That's sleep, nutrition, movement, stress and emotional mastery, relationships, our thoughts and mindset, as well as purpose. In this Thrive State Accelerator, you're also going to get a bonus module on optimization. That's how I talk about supplementation, peptides, all the optimization techniques I use with my clients to get them to the Thrive State. Now, for some of you who are just joining us for the first time, you guys might be wondering, what is the Thrive State? Well, the Thrive State is actually the energy, the epigenetic environment we give to ourselves, telling our DNA how to act and how to respond. And if we want optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, if we can master these 7 bioenergetic elements, our ability to have those 3 things that we just said, optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, is at its greatest. And it also prevents you from getting chronic symptoms like brain fog, being overweight, feeling sluggish, acne, pain, all these chronic symptoms, as well as preventing you from getting chronic disease. So getting to that Thrive State is really getting to that state to master being that very best version of yourself so you could show up for you, for your family, for your business, everything that's important to you. So go ahead, check it out right now at kienvu.com/accelerator and use coupon code podcast25 for 25% off. Now back to the podcast. That's really, really great advice. It seems like some of that can translate to a busy executive as well, as really kind of understanding pockets of time, you're going to, get to your texts and emails.
100%. Yeah. And this is kind of where I started with it. My previous company, I was a busy CEO at over 100 employees. We were managing 200 enterprise clients, and I was, needless to say, very busy and often on my device. But you don't need to be on your device when you're reading your son a bedtime story. Like the world could wait. And one thing we encourage when we're talking to busy executives is, at the end of the day, most things can wait a few minutes, right? You don't need to be on 24/7. TikTok won't go away. It'll still be there. That email will still be there. And outside of some crazy urgent circumstances, the world's not going to end. So that's not, and this is a very cliche tactic, but turn off notifications. The only notifications I have on my phone are my alarm app for my house, and then SMS, and that's only because the only people that text me are my mom, my spouse, and a handful of very dear friends. So I know that if they're texting me, I really need to get in touch. But you don't need social notifications on your phone. You're going to be much happier, much more productive if you time manage that and chunk it in, and you'll get a lot more done and be a lot happier in the process.
Is there a lot of data demonstrating that decrease, time on computers and devices lead to better productivity?
100%. Yeah. And I could send over, some of the studies that we've done and then some of the other published studies. But yeah, it's interesting. And I'll send over the specific numbers on another one on loneliness.
Yeah.
This big study out of the UK, I believe, found that it's counterintuitive. A lot of people think that the more time they spend on social media, the happier they're going to be because they're supposedly interacting with friends. But it found a consistent and repeatable increase in loneliness and decrease in happiness the more hours that you spent on social media. So it has a negative effect, and we could talk about some of the mechanisms of that. There's a lot going on with the need for positive reinforcement and social approval. There's a lot going on there. It's counterintuitive thinking that the more time I spend on Facebook or TikTok because it's entertaining, the better I'm going to feel. But for the vast majority of cases, it just doesn't work that way.
So it really sounds like, much of the technology in the past, certainly not demonizing the medium for what it is, but just being very conscious and purposeful, understanding the consequences of unconscious use of the medium.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And again, like we're not anti Facebook
Right.
necessarily. Like there's I'm on Facebook every now and then. You know, there's good uses for it, but you don't need to let it own you. You don't need to let it completely control your life. And then you need to be more deliberate about when you're accessing and when you're utilizing. I think if you do just those basic things and take an inventory of, you know, what kind of life do you want to lead? Do you want to spend all this time on this device doing things that really aren't adding meaningful value? So there's an opportunity cost there with time. Or do you want to create more meaningful experiences and be a little bit happier, a little bit healthier?
Yeah, I really got to say, I was filming a reality show in February, and they took our devices away for 10 days. And we were interacting with, a couple hundred, other people in the reality show. And I got to say that during that time, number one, I definitely felt um, the knob just reaching for my pocket, but not having anything there. But over time, also realized just how present I was able to be with the people I was with.
That's amazing. So that's actually a thing, phantom vibration syndrome, where you think that you have an alert or a vibration, but there's nothing there. So that's a mechanical and chemical thing that's going on. But yeah, it's amazing. Like when folks actually put down their device and have a meaningful interaction, whether it's a date, whether it's a interaction with their child or with a friend, yeah, it changes the dynamic. So you know, a lot of what we talk about is just getting time back too. You know, if we could do some things to get, what would you do if you had 30 minutes a week extra in your life and compounded over, you know, the next 10, 20, 30, hopefully 40, 50 years? That's a lot of time. And that's just 30 minutes. I think we could do a lot better. I think we could get folks back 3 to 4 hours a week of their time. And that's meaningful. So again, like our two pillars of our argument is one, opportunity cost, and what could you do with that time, whether it's exercise, spending time with family, working more, whatever it is. And then two, just the emotional and physical impacts that you're going to feel by having just a little bit more presence and a little bit less dependency on your devices and technology.
This is really great stuff. And for people who are listening, I know that they're probably, health conscious people to busy executives that are listening to the podcast and whatnot. Um, would you say that there are any other, top strategies or potential additional tech that people have used very, very successfully in their digital detox program? Or, I know some people have like iPhone lockers that they lock up their phones. There are certainly timed uh, timed stops that they have to their
Sure.
apps and their devices, things like that. What have you found to be most successful for most people?
That's a smart question. So there's a lot of tools out there. There's various apps. There's physical lockers. There's things
Right.
like that, and some of those can be helpful for some people, especially in a pinch, right? You know, if
Yeah.
I'm on this trip or I'm need a quick thing this week with my family. But we like to take a little bit more holistic approach. Like, let's
Mm.
take an inventory first and take a broad view of, okay, what am I using and why? How often am I using it? And is that adding value either to my personal life, entertainment, or work, right? And then from there, we could chip away and be like, okay, we don't actually need six of these 10 things that we're doing. Let's try cutting those out. So I think to be successful long term, all those things you mentioned, those are really, really great short term fixes. But most times the research shows that people will come back to old habits. So they might have the timer, they might have the app that shuts things off. That'll work for a little bit. Maybe a long bit for some folks, but eventually they'll come back to that need and that dependency to get back to previous behaviors. So we want to try to help fix those behaviors and start with a clean foundation. So yeah, the first step is just taking a very honest view of, okay, how much time am I spending? What am I spending it on? And is that value creating for myself or others? And then from there,
Yeah.
chipping away. And part of the premium product we're launching this summer helps do that in a very systematic way. But you know, some very rudimentary ones, and there's nothing groundbreaking about these, but cliche ones that are very easy for people to start. No phones in the bedroom. Don't have it in there. No phones at the dinner table. No phones when you're out at a dinner event or a lunch. Don't even have it on the table. Turn off notifications outside of actual critical, emergency type notifications. And then, don't always be compulsive. This is a big one for folks that are content creators. Don't be compulsive to check your likes and your followers. It's
Mm,
a huge mistake. So at the end of the day, if you have a content post, it might be the best or worst post, nothing is going to really change if you check it every 20 minutes or if you check it in 3 days. It's still the same outcome. It's a finite outcome of how much engagement you got, but you're going to feel a lot better and you have a lot more time to focus on other things if you're not completely refreshing. We find that a lot. This is extremely prevalent with teenagers as well. Many will delete their post if it doesn't have an acceptable amount of likes within the first 2 hours. But also with adults, just this constant compulsion to check, refresh, to make sure they're getting that social gratification. So try to itch away from that and have a little bit more balance. Also, focus on intimacy. We found that 20% report checking notifications while they're having sex, and that sounds completely
whoa.
mind-boggling. Yeah, it's absurd, but that's validated over thousands of subjects and different cohorts. And that's one that just, if you're doing that, try to not do that. Put your phone in a different room. Some other ones, there's a lot of data and research out on the impacts of sleep, and obviously, the benefits of sleep and how
Yeah.
critical that is for longevity. But then there's a lot of data showing how scrolling right before bed, even an hour before bed, that's going to impact retinal issues and sleep, deep sleep. So don't look at your phone an hour before you go to bed. Just put it away, shut it down. And then also first thing when you wake up in the morning. Most
Right.
people, like 80% will check their phone within the first 10 minutes. Try to wait a half hour, maybe more if you can. Don't make that the first impulse. You wake up and you're setting your brain in this routine that I'm in this mode of kind of reactionary behavior.
Yeah.
Do your morning routine. Don't have that as part of your morning routine, and start to phase it out a little bit.
Those are really great practical pieces of advice. I love the fact that you are addressing everything from a holistic perspective. And I think, the next question is from a holistic, perspective, do you find certain triggers that lead people to start this process to begin with? We know with food addiction, just uncomfortable feelings will have people reach for something to achieve some comfort. What are some root causes that make people, even start this process?
Yeah, so that's a smart question. It's a long answer and it's a complicated one. COVID certainly exacerbated a lot of this, right? Folks
Mhm.
were home, they weren't able to in a lot of areas have in-person interaction. Everything moved online, and the world was in a very chaotic spot. So things were very much impacted by COVID and the isolation there. It depends on the cohort we're looking at. Like I
Yeah.
think teenagers are a very different conversation. There's so much social approval and acceptance going on, and the need to stay in with the in crowd, and the influence that it's a completely different psychology of
Mm,
what kind of gets them into it. For a young adult or professional, it depends. Sometimes someone's a busy professional and they're dependent on their work and they need to work to survive, and a lot of their work's on their phone, and so it just starts there. But we find with social in particular, and I can talk about some of the mechanical changes that really emphasize this, but the one was endless scroll. And this was invented back in
yeah.
2009, but I don't know if you remember, you're old enough to remember pagination where you had to click to the next page,
Mhm.
right? And that once an endless scroll was invented, it's a slot machine effect,
Right.
literally with a constant dopamine release where
Mhm.
you'll never reach the end. And so you're constantly scrolling, you're constantly searching for that next best thing, that next best image, whatever it is, and that really mess things up. But everyone's very individual with what gets them really attached. But a lot of times it's avoidance of uncomfortable behavior, right? So
Yeah.
68% report pretending to check their phone to avoid talking to someone.
Yeah.
So they'll do that just to avoid that social interaction. So they're uncomfortable with social interaction. And what we're finding with college age students, and this is stemming from high school age students, is because of the lack of personal interaction, it's a snowball effect. So they're learning less communication skills, less empathy, and then it just snowballs because then they're even more reliant on their technology to avoid the social skills that they haven't learned because they've been so much on their technology.
Oh, wow. Uh,
That was a long answer. I'm sorry.
no, this is great. I hope, it gives people a sense of maybe the root causes of it, and certainly just how insidious something like this can be on our overall mental, physical, emotional, social, and spiritual health. I mentioned that, in my work, I really talk about the energetic state that we are in, that we can create a state of vibrancy that we tell ourselves in any moment in time that it is safe to give us optimal health. Now, that state is predicated on the choices that we make in our life. Now, we make choices from a reactionary state that is based of fear and not safety. We make choices that are detrimental to our health, including being on our devices. Or we can make choices that are conscious, where we vote for connection, for love, for movements, and things like that. And our ability to be able to make that conscious choice really comes down to our ability to have attention and awareness. And what I find from digital devices is that it's, removing our ability to be aware and to be attentive.
Absolutely. There's good news though. So, back in 2013, the DSM-5 added behavioral addiction to their official diagnoses roster. And technically, phone addiction isn't there, but it's encompassed into behavioral addiction. So it's definitely, there's addictive components to it. But the good news, and I'm working on a paper with our head of psychiatry. It's a completely different profile to detox from. So getting, improving, and stopping behaviors with tech, you're not going to have the relapses that you have from getting off of heroin, right? So it's a much easier path. It takes a lot more discipline, but you're not going to have a lot of the physical and chemical challenges that you would with other drug dependencies. So good news is that, yeah, if you recognize the impact that tech's having on your life, and you're committed to improve that, and you want to live a different type of life, there's ways to do it, and we're rooting for you. We hope we can help you along the way.
Well, sounds great. How do people find out more about Digital Detox, your resources, and the new products and offerings you'll be having coming out this summer?
Yeah, just go to digitaldetox.com. You can find everything there. We have a weekly newsletter that's very lighthearted. If you go to digitaldetox.com/score, by the time this airs, you could take our DORA score, and that's a really easy assessment to. I think folks will like that. It gives them kind of perspective of where they fall in terms of impacts from technology on their life, and from there, we'll keep you posted on some great opportunities coming down the pipe.
That sounds wonderful. Now, with everything that you've done in your life, including helping people get off their tech, what has been your best medicine?
So my best medicine, yeah, would can I name two? Or
Mhm.
well, if I name one, it would be exercise. So I have a very diligent exercise routine. I think that's one of the best things people can do for a long, healthy, and happy life. Tied with that would be really working on my personal relationships with my close friends, with my family, being extremely present, listening more, and just trying to be a great member of the community. Yeah, for me, exercise, which helps a lot, and then just trying to be as present as possible and focused as possible.
Well, thank you so much for your time and the wisdom that you shared on the Thrive State podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a great conversation.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Thrive State podcast. And if this podcast is bringing a lot of value to you, if you find that your life is just improving with this podcast, that your life is getting to the next level, please consider supporting it. And here's a few ways you can do so. You can do so by liking this video and commenting on this video, and also sharing this video with your friends and family. Another thing you can do is go to ratethispodcast.com/ThriveState. Go ahead and leave us a 5-star review there. It will really, really help this show grow. And this will give me more time so that I could actually give more content to you, just like you got in this episode. And if you haven't already picked up a copy of my book, Thrive State, your blueprint for optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. You can pick it up now. It became a #1 new release in longevity. Go to thrivestatebook.com. And if you enjoy the book, please consider leaving us a review as well. And the last thing you can do, if you're liking everything here and you want to work more closely with me as well as my team to get you into the Thrive State, go to kienvu.com/accelerator and consider joining the home course, the Thrive State Accelerator. It's really the course that I use. It's the concepts that I use personally when I work with CEOs, celebrities, and my high-profile clients to get them to the Thrive State. Again, the Thrive State Accelerator at kienvu.com/accelerator. And because you're a listener of this podcast, I want you to save 25% by using the coupon code podcast25. I hope we continue to give value to you. And remember always, you are your best medicine.